Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Green, and I'm the founder of Dear Producer. Welcome to anybody who's new to Dear Producer and these webinars. I launched the site, seems like a long time ago, but it was actually just 2018 with the help to bring together the producing community and educate filmmakers on the state of the business as it relates to independent film. If you don't already subscribe to the newsletter, I'd recommend that you do, which is on the Dear Producer website. I have a few sponsors who have made this all possible, particularly these webinars. And so I just want to thank Cinereach and Genuine Article Pictures and the Creative Producer Residency at the Nevada City Film Festival and the Media Farm. It's always been my goal to make sure that all the content on Dear Producer is free, and their support has allowed me to do that. We're going to just kind of jump right in. Derek's going to talk about the company, the population a little bit. There's some more info on the website where you registered. And then I just wanted to say, for those of you who joined our last webinar that was preparing for 2021, I was just telling our panelists, I'm going to cover some of the same questions. I think that there's some kind of big existential questions in independent film that we all need to keep digging into. And because everything's been changing so quickly, answers are changing so quickly as well. So we're just going to kind of keep digging into some of these big questions. I have a lot prepared, but also use the Q&A box if you have questions as they come up. And then I encourage you to use the chat just to connect with one another about what we're talking about. And so with that, I will turn it over to Derek. Why don't you tell us a bit about the population and your company?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you for devoting this webinar to our company. So the population is a filmmaker-driven company focused on producing work featuring underrepresented voices. All three of us, co-founded the population about 1.5 years ago. Minette Louie, Molly Asher, and myself. Since then, we have made 3 films. So the first film is called Swallow by Carlo Marabello Davis, and that was released by IFC Films last year, April. More about that release soon.
It was released March 6th.
March.
Last normal weekend.
Yes, that's right. We'll talk about drive-ins and stuff. The next film that we made was called I Carry You With Me by Heidi Ewing, and that's going to be released by Sony Pictures Classics later on this year. And then we're in post for a film called Catch the Fair One by Joseph Kubata Vladyka. And we're trying to navigate and figure out what we're going to do on the festival circuit. So more about that too later on. So we started, how we got together is that we all 3 worked at Game Changer Films. And Minette Louie was the president of that, and I helped her run that company. And Molly was there also. So once that round of financing was finished with Game Changer, we decided to create our own company. And as you know, well, back up. Game Changer was the first equity film fund that was specifically devoted to providing financing for narrative features directed by women. And we made 10 films while we were there. But once that round of that iteration of Game Changer ended, we decided to create our own company. And we also wanted to go back to our production roots. Game Changer was was a film fund, so we also wanted to produce and work on the ground production. And so, we also wanted to expand our mission. So we wanted, to work in a lot of underrepresented voices. So we also wanted to work with BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus communities and differently abled folks. So we expanded that. We are also doing not only narrative features, but we're also doing series now and expanded also into podcasts. So So yeah, that's a little bit about the population. And recently, we just signed our first look deal with Topic Studios, which we're very excited about. And we're embarking this new year with a new partnership with them.
Fantastic. Yeah, powerhouse group right here, especially this last year. I mean, it's incredible the titles you guys have that we're going to talk about. I'm going to start. I asked this on the last webinar, but just kind of a basic, bigger picture question. You know, throughout the pandemic, I have noticed that there are two types of people, whether it comes to the filmmakers or distributors or nonprofits or festivals, and it's those people who think that, you know, for our industry, when it comes to the pandemic, those who believe everything is going to go back to normal and those who don't. And so I want to ask specifically when it comes to kind of festivals and exhibition, like not talking about production, which one are you? I'll start with Manette.
Well, it's interesting. I've noticed that, producers, independent producers, since we are always having to be nimble and, we're always worried about the shit hitting the fan any second. I think that we're more prepared, and we think about contingencies and like plan Bs and plan Cs, whereas some of the more traditional industry people who have their set way of doing things, certain distributors and festivals and sales agents and whatnot, are having a little bit more trouble adjusting. I mean, we can see that in like the big exodus out of agencies, like every agent is becoming a manager / producer or whatever. So they're kind of trying to horn in on our territory, I guess.
Because it's so easy to be a producer.
Yeah, apparently.
Manage, produce, but so I think that the filmmakers, the indie filmmakers, I think are prepared for this, except when it comes to finances, because none of us have any money. But yeah, so I mean, I think that I've been asking, with I Carry You With Me, which is a film that premiered at Sundance in last year, a year ago, and was picked up by Sony Classics. Like, we had our theatrical release date shifted 5 times, and because it is a theatrical movie, it is a brick and mortar theater movie, and it's not something you could put on a streamer and expect people to come to it, so I completely understand why they want to wait until theaters are open. But I've been asking for a plan B from the very beginning, since April. I'm like, okay, well, what if theaters never reopen? And there's definitely a value to being optimistic and trying to move forward with the traditional plan, because who the hell knows what's, like, who knew the vaccine was going to happen this fast?
Yeah.
Who knew there was going to be a variant? Like, nobody knows what's going on. So I don't know. I'm talking in circles at this point.
So you don't believe, do you believe things are going to go back to normal? Are you one of the believers that everyone's going to want to gather again? We'll be in theaters this year, or do you feel like there is kind of a seismic shift happening in terms of how people consume movies?
It's funny. I've been doing a panel at least once a month, and like my answer changes every month. But I had been very optimistic about things going back to normal at the end of this year, but now I'm not so sure. So I do think that people will be itching to get back to theaters. Like, I do think people really miss that experience. But even before the pandemic happened, people are already migrating to streaming, and building out their home theater systems. And so I think there is a seismic shift. And I think that, like, for example, producers, we're going to kind of be more like producers for hire, because there's going to be this voracious appetite for new content from these streamers, and they'll need people to make this stuff. So we're seeing that more on our end. It's like sort of like private equity is disappearing as a financing mechanism, and these streamers are financing smaller movies. Like, I have a bunch of friends who've made some sub 5 million films that were financed by Netflix and Amazon. So yeah.
Molly?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I guess I'm optimistic about, I think in the same way that Manette was saying, like, I do think that people are going to want to go back to theaters, but I think it's just going to take longer than we all thought. But I think what's going to end up coming out of this is possibly that the theatrical windows will be smaller. It won't be like 3 months that it has to be in a theater before it goes online. So I think that's something that's going to come out of all of this. Whether that's good or bad, I'm not really sure. I think it's just a matter of like negotiating to make sure that you're not getting the short end of the stick financially, if that's what's happening. And then you asked about film festivals, and I at first, when film festivals were coming online, I thought, okay, well, this could be a silver lining here, like maybe because films can reach audiences that wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to go to Park City, somewhat more democratized in a way. And I think that it can be that way, but I really wish, actually, how you had said, Rebecca, in one of your letters, that we could get some data, so that we could use this in a way to say that, like, to distributors, hey, this region of people, or this demographic of people, we're all watching this movie. Thinking that specifically for Catch the Fair one, that to be able to say, like, that people are interested in this type of movie. So hopefully they were reading your blog and will listen to you.
It does get to some people. I think it's a really interesting aspect, because distributors have never been transparent with us, right? Like we never get any information, but now that it's gone to this digital space, there's like a whole nother level of transparency that really, I feel like as filmmakers we're owed, for our films, to better curate, better reach our audiences, and also to continue to create for audiences. I think there's just blanket statements made about certain communities and what they want, but until that data is shared, you can't tell me a certain type of audience wants this or that film. So yeah, it's definitely something that I know Brian Newman's been advocating for in his newsletter as well all year, and I think filmmakers just need to keep bringing it up, because it's very true. Derek, you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I actually feel that people will want to go back to the theaters. Once it's safe. I'm actually going to talk about, like, once it's safe. And
that's, I guess,
know
that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that people are dying to go out after being cooped up for what it might be 2 years. I think that it will become an event again. I think that probably, the multiplexes and the big blockbuster movies will still be in the theaters for, folks that love those type of films. And then there, the art house films and the foreign films might end up going to, let's say, nonprofit theater organizations, museums, and, educational institutions, just to sustain, some of the nonprofit, some of the costs with, government funds or donors and all that stuff, which I'm not opposed to, because I actually really like those type of theaters and organizations. And I think that folks that really are cinephiles and want to see, these films on the big screen will have the opportunity to do so, and hopefully it'll be subsidized in some way. So I also feel like, the film festivals, once it's safe again, I really hope that it becomes brick and mortar again, because I feel like the audiences and folks in the film industry want to go to. I don't think that they really want to go to the film festivals, and there is something very special about that. And I really feel that they will survive. I mean, I know that sounds very, very optimistic, but there is something to be said about us doing business at Sundance, us doing business at, Tribeca or Cannes or whatever. I think that the face-to-face is going to be is important, and I think that people who go to film festivals want to see things in the theater. And so I'm being optimistic, but talk to me next week.
As everyone knows, I'm usually on the pessimistic side. I think what you're saying, I think, is true from the filmmaker community. I don't know that it's true from the business side. I think that, virtual festivals were all last year. I anticipate them. Maybe Toronto gets something more in person than anybody else, but we already know, that, Tribeca, South by, like, they've already announced it. So I think we're in a year of another virtual festivals. And I just wonder, these companies that spend so much money to go to the festivals and rep and buy, and like to have 2 years without having to do that, when they're also dealing with cuts and layoffs, like, I'm worried that the sales side of it is gonna enjoy not going. And it's not really going to be up to us. And, and in talking to a friend who's at Endeavor Content, he said, we have now changed where we're looking at movies throughout the year now more than waiting for the festivals. I think that's good for us. I think we need to get
Yeah.
out of this place of, well, let's just see if it gets into Sundance. Like, it can't be the only way to sell your movie. But I agree. I would like to be there too, but I don't know. I feel like they might get comfortable with not having to do all this travel and spend all this money.
But the thing is, though, I mean, if they have to, then they have to. If the filmmaker or the festival is not going to show the film virtually and demand that the buyers see it with an audience, then they're going to see it with an audience. And that's the thing that's missing here, is that, like, you know, with theatrical distribution, what it has going for it is that it's like, the films are special. You know, that's what Sony Classics keeps telling me about I Carry You With Me. It's like, we can't just put your movie on a streamer because it's special. It needs to be handled that way. It can't become this thumbnail on a screen, which I completely agree with. It needs handling. And so I think that, you know, I know there's like all sorts of debate about, like, you know, being able to access a movie and stuff, but the exclusivity makes it feel special. And some films need that, you know.
What I think it's going to be, and I think you hit it, where I think it's really, and this is where we as a community have to be more cohesive and united, in that if we decide, no, we need our films to be seen at the festival in that way, like, there has to be a concerted effort for us to say, like, if 20% of the people say I have to be at the festival and then 80 don't, like, there has to be some communication amongst the community of, we need to make sure that they're showing up in this way for us. I don't know how we do that, but, you know, I agree.
It was already happening with South by, for example, like,
Right.
South, you know, the buyers would send their junior buyers, and then, like, we'd have to send links to the decision makers. So it was already sort of happening, but I guess, you know, certain festivals like Sundance obviously have the pull to bring the big buyers.
Yeah. And you said something that I want to touch on before I forget is, Manette, you said, you know, it's a theatrical movie. And I would love to hear from you, how do you define that? You know, I will say, Molly, I got to see Nomadland through my Academy screeners, and it was truly the first time through the whole pandemic where I just, like, ached for not being able to be in a theater. Like, truly, like, a movie that both is thematically and visually about the landscape of America. Like, it pained me, and I hadn't had that experience so far. I mean, of course there's, like, oh, I wish I could have seen it, but, like, it got me to my core. And so to me, that was very clear to me. But I'd love to hear from you guys, because it's a phrase we hear a lot, but what does it actually mean to you? Derek?
Well, I find, well, when I think about theatrical films, it's like an event, you know, and it's something that I would go out of my way to go and see in the theater. Mind you, I like to go see things in the theater way more than I do in television. I watch everything in the theater when I can, you know. So to me, almost everything is a theatrical film. But I mean, when we talk about it in this landscape, it's usually, for me, if it's an event, if it's shot in a way in which it can be appreciated in a larger. I mean, people are watching. It pains me to think that people are watching things in screens this small.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that I'm a cinephile, but I mean, and the younger generations don't give a shit. You know, they're like, I'll watch it this small. But I think that it's because they're not raised in understanding the appreciation of a big screen, and why it's important to see the reactions of, you know, actors' reactions and things that are super minute, that make a huge difference in the narrative of the film, you know, like the reaction of an actor. So that's how I define a theatrical film. I think almost everything is a theatrical film, to be quite honest, because I mean, I will go to the theater at least 3-4 times a week.
There's a whole chunk of Netflix films that are not theatrical.
You're right. You're right.
Pick it up, Manette, from there.
Very basically, I think a theatrical film is a film that doesn't fit into an algorithm, that doesn't fit into a box.
Mhm.
A film that you might need a little bit more patience to, like, sit through, and, like, you know, because if it's on your TV screen, you can click away really easily. You can check Instagram, you can check Twitter, and by the way, it drives me nuts when film Twitter, like, is like, they've gotten a screener for like 24 hours, and then they're all tweeting during it. I'm like, stop tweeting through somebody's movie, please. Like, it just drives me nuts, you know? So, and it's also a movie that can't be sold by a thumbnail, you know, which means, like, you know, all movies that have no stars in them, I think need theaters to help spread that word of mouth, again, to make it feel special. It's like, why am I going to see this movie with no stars in it, you know? Because there's something about it that's special, you know, something about it that you can't get from just like clicking on Netflix. So that's
I like that definition of a film that like can't be helped by algorithms. I think that's interesting.
I
Yeah.
like that too, because
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that too, because I think that there are, I mean, I'm working on a film right now, developing that I don't think it needs to go into a theater. And I think it would be great. It's a movie that I would want to get a bottle of wine, my girlfriends, and like sit on the couch and watch together.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a good film. It's going to, but it is one that you can pitch it easy. You can understand what it is. Whereas something like Nomadland, I guess, would be an example of something that doesn't fit into a box. Like it you know, it has all these non-actors. It's, you know, it's poetic, you know, so it's not, so it doesn't fit into the box. I think that's a really great way of putting it.
Yeah.
And by the way, Nomadland will be in IMAX actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I'll go. I mean, I'll go see it again if I can go see it again. I can't yet here where I'm at, but if I can, I certainly would go watch it again on the big screen. So going into like, let's go into the point of this webinar, which is like the nuts and bolts of your films. And, you know, would love if you could kind of walk us through, we're going to talk about Swallow, Nomadland, and I Carry You With Me in terms of, you know, what was plan A and then what happened. And also just, you know, the pluses and the pros and cons of how it changed. Maybe some things came out of it that, you know, you didn't expect that were good things, or maybe it was clearly you learned that, no, we need theaters, you know, like just kind of walk us through the process on those films. And do we want to start with Swallow, since that was really truly like the first, I consider like the first movie out in the pandemic that had to deal with it at the most last minute process.
Yeah, well, like Minette said, it opened on March 6th. And so we had a week in New York and LA, and then March 13th, I think, was when it was supposed to open up throughout the country. And then of course that was the day when I think we all were in lockdown.
Yeah.
Although I remember, Minette, you skipped the like party after the premiere because you're like,
I am premiere because I was
interesting.
already freaked out by then. I was already freaked out on March 6th.
And then when I think back of like us being in that bar all close together on March 6th,
crazy.
Like it was crazy. But then, so because it's IFC, it was day and date, and so it ended up, so it was right away online. And I think that it was, since it was at the beginning of the pandemic, people weren't fatigued by their screens and were looking for content, and you know, and IFC did such a great job with their marketing of it. They made a really dynamic poster that I think drew people in.
Yeah.
They were, you know, getting all these things written up about it, so it was in the conversation, and so people were watching that. I think we had more people watching it than we would have normally, and I think that it went beyond what they expected it was going to do. And I think that was because it was at the beginning of the pandemic.
Well, yeah, because I think at that time, nobody, like a lot of distributors didn't know what was going to happen with the theaters. So like a lot of them were holding back their films. And so there were no films to write about, but ours was out. So like we got so much coverage from the press that we wouldn't have gotten. So we benefited from it for sure. And then at some point in April, IFC started using drive-ins. And our movie was the first. They put our movie in this drive-in in Ocala, Florida, a very red part of Florida, and our movie has themes that are not that are blue,
not very red.
but you know, like it did pretty well. Like people just wanted to get out. They're like, oh, they didn't even care what the movie was. They're just like, they went and got tickets to it, and so we were like #1 at the box office. As a fluke, just because like IFC was the only distributor reporting a first run film. So anyway, so we were #1 at the box office. And then we had traditional sort of like transactional VOD and then SVOD. And then we also had very robust international distribution because we released in theaters in France in January 1st before the US release, and then like the rest of the world was doing better last year. Most of the rest of the world was doing better. So we actually had physical releases in all the Asian countries, Taiwan and Korea, right? We opened in Japan last week. So like we've had like a life for the movie outside of the US.
And it seems like maybe your film got a boost from the pandemic in that way. Like it got something like the drive-ins and the attention, like maybe that it wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So do you feel like in this particular scenario, this film
yeah, it's a silver lining, I think.
Yeah.
We managed to find. But I wonder if we didn't have that 1 week in the theater, and it went and it just went online. I wonder if that made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think it did, because there's a ton of press that happens before that point, so it was teed up,
Yeah.
And then the week in the theaters really did help, and so.
Well, Molly, I'm curious with Nomadland to also talk about the award circuit, which you guys are winning every award under the sun, which is very deserved in my eyes. And how I have no grasp of how that has changed aside from the amount of emails I get to watch the movies in this Academy screening room. But, if you could also, in regards to the release of that film, also touch on the awards campaign and how that has been affected.
Well, yeah. So for festivals, it was really kind of wonderful that that Telluride, Venice, and TIFF decided to hold hands basically and not be as only having the premiere there and not allowing the film to be at the other festivals. So that and it really went with the whole theme really of the movie. Mm-hmm. And so that was wonderful. And although very strange to we ended up with Telluride ended up having a special screening in LA, a drive-in, and a side comment of that was a very, very apocalyptic experience because red sky and then ash falling from the sky as we're all in our vehicles watching a movie about people in their vehicles, and like it just was it was just a very, very strange moment, but really wonderful that we could have that did happen. But I think that the festival experience, it's like that movie I think is different than say Catch the Fair one that we have in post-production, because there's a non-actor, no name talent in the film, and so so that's going to be a whole other experience, whereas Nomadland I think did all right being in festivals that were online because it has Frances McDormand, and so the festivals were being used to just get the film out there. So I don't know how much of a lesson there really would be to learn about the experience of Nomadland festivals, because it's its own thing it was gonna live its life already, if that mm-hmm. makes sense. Mm-hmm. But actually though I think it did reach more people because the festivals were online. And then what else did you ask about the marketing, or?
I get, I guess in terms of in the award circuit on this one also being an online experience, and, having had a film that's done an awards campaign, so much money is spent, unnecessary money is spent. I do think it's an area in which if we spent less money, it would be better off. And so, the lunches, the dinners, the screenings, I think that's a positive that we lose those. Do you think that it still had the same kind of push on the award circuit, that do you feel like something was lost there, or that it still worked in the virtual space?
Well, this is my first experience in an awards campaign, but they're still spending basically the same amount of money that they would have spent.
Oh.
Yeah, on what?
Oh.
Ask to see the expenses.
There's some really amazing art marketing that their team is making, like really, really beautiful stuff, like unique, just one of a kind type of things. But yeah, I have no idea how that money is all spent.
What is the rollout of you said it's going to be on IMAX. What is the rollout of this film? What is the plan right now?
So it's going to be it's opening in theaters on February 19th, but a week before that it's opening IMAX. And then there'll be an announcement soon as to some other ways of seeing the film. I'm not able to say right now, but there'll be a press release in the coming days.
Sure, yeah, okay. And then,
it will be available for people to see.
and then I guess, and maybe if you can't talk about it, that's totally fine. I guess, we talked about windowing. And so, given theaters are either closed or at 25% capacity, is it, is there going to be shift in smaller windows, or are those conversations that are happening? Or is it just going to be a typical release like they would usually do?
I mean, I think even Searchlight and Sony Classics, these are very traditional theatrical distributors. And I think everybody's talking about shortening windows. I mean, even after the whole Wonder Woman thing happened with HBO Max, I think Sony came out to say that directors expressed greater interest in working with Sony because they're like the last sort of theatrical company left, who believes in theaters and theater releasing. And so, but even the chairman was quoted as saying, like, the only thing that we're thinking about futzing with are the windows from theatrical to VOD. So I think everybody has to have that discussion, because it's like, we do have these films that have been made and have been sitting there. It's like, and there's nowhere to show them,
Right. And audiences want to see them. They're like,
and they're getting old.
Right. Old. And more other movies are going to be coming out. Yeah.
Well, I guess that's part of the question too of, I am somebody who believes people are going to want to go back to the theaters. I do question which theaters will still be standing, at the end of this. And also, what movies are people going to be willing to go see? Like, are they, everyone isn't like you, Derek, that go, I live in Detroit.
I know.
I have friends who are like genuine moviegoers, but I don't know that they're going to take the chance on the indie film with nobody they don't know in it. Will they go to Star Wars and Marvel and the big romantic comedies and Judd Apatow is like, I like more of like the known quantities I think they'll come out for. And so my worry is like, is the plan to sit on these movies until they can be in theaters, or do we adapt and see if we can get to them, to audiences? Is there like, do either of you have like a point of view on, I guess it's like, how long do we wait and see what's going to happen?
I don't know, but I'm getting really tired of waiting
Yes.
for I Carry You With Me to come out. I don't know, and it's like, we keep thinking that like theaters can reopen, things will get better, and things don't get better. So I just, it's coming up on a year now. We premiered next week, it'll be a year since we premiered at Sundance. And like, I just want all of us filmmakers, all the people who made the movie, just want people to see this movie, and they can't.
And I feel like that's a film, it's a beautiful film. And to me, that's the kind of film that, if with the right press, which we know it has, like, with the right push in the press and the slow word of mouth build, even without theaters, to me, it's a movie people take a chance on, that maybe they wouldn't have gone to the theaters, but it's at home. I can put it on and I can watch it. And so I don't know, like, I go back and forth. I do believe that the theatrical experience is necessary and I want it, but I also, live in a place where people don't go to the theaters like people in the industry do. And I would rather give them the chance to take a chance on a movie than not.
It's true. And, I will say that, there's definitely a privilege to living in a city like New York or LA, where you have these art house theaters that show these movies. And so like, streaming is great in terms of like democratizing the access to movies, because there are really great movies, art house movies on streaming. I don't want to discount streaming. So I definitely see, and the fact that, like, for example, Minari and Nomadland had their 1 week qualifying runs in 2020 via Film Society of Lincoln Center virtually, and everyone in the US could access that, whereas like our movie, like along with The Father and the Sony Classics movies, like they put us in a real theater for a week in Long Island, so it was limited, but just to qualify. And like, was that even a release? Like, did people go to that? Like, I don't know, and so I think there were a lot of critics who didn't consider us for 2020 lists, because like nobody
were confused.
Everybody's confused.
And nobody could see them, nobody, like it's like, yeah. So, but I think I don't blame anybody for that. It's everybody's trying to figure this out. And like, the other weird thing about this award season is that it, normally it's the calendar year. So it's like 20 films released in 2020. This year, like the Oscars and the other awards bodies have extended it to the end of February. But most of the critics bodies have kept it to just calendar year 2020. So there's this weird, like, it's weird. And we didn't really find that out until late which is why like we scrambled to put it in a theater in Long Island. So, but you know, usually like you want to use that momentum of the critics' bodies awards and stuff to like build toward the Oscar. So this year it's just been like really backwards, and the critics are really confused, you know. So, but yeah, I mean, but what you said earlier about like, I think people not spending money and not whining and dining, you know, the Oscar members and the Academy members and stuff. I think it's good. I think democratizing the process is good because, you know, the fact is that the films that have the biggest marketing budgets are the ones that get nominated. And there is an Oscar industrial complex built around this whole awards thing. Like, you know, it looks on the outside that it's like, oh, you know, films with merit, like the actual good films get nominated, but that's not true. It's the films that have the biggest marketing campaigns, that have the biggest stars. So
it's still happening though.
It's
still happening.
Like I have a
Yeah.
friend whose film is from Senegal, Coffee's Daughter. That's their Oscar. What's it called? Like Senegal has chosen that as their Oscar qualifying for something. You know.
Yeah.
Submission. And so I was just having a conversation with the producer, and he, you know, this is his first time with anything like this, and he was wanting to know about how to campaign to the Academy, and like he doesn't have a US distributor. He has like just a French distributor, and so it's kind of like there's no way that he can get the film out there, and it's a shame.
So this is, I think, a good segue, and this is part of the conversation we had last time that I think we just all need to keep digging into more, which is, you know, one of the things I've been talking about through the whole pandemic is the lack of collaboration. And Molly, you brought up, you know, the Telluride TIFF in Venice coming together, which is one of the few, like really on that big scale of organizations coming together in a way that I think helped everybody. And I've just been really frustrated in it. And there was a tweet this week that I saw that kind of contextualized it more for me in that like we just can't compete, right? Like they're like everyone is holding their own ground, and there's Sundance and IFP, and everyone just promotes their own lab projects, and there's all the small distributors, and like there's just no way to push through it. As much as like I don't want to like promote consolidation, because I think there's obviously issues in doing that as well. It is happening in the bigger studio space in a way that is giving films more power. And so the tweet I saw was Rich Greenfield, who runs Lightshed, did a breakdown of Instagram followers, right? And so Netflix has 25.9 million Instagram followers. And then the next drop down is Disney Plus at only 3.6, right? And like Prime only has 1.4, jump down to HBO Max, 770,000. And then the last is Discovery Plus at 60,000, but they just launched, right? And so then today before this, I looked up, you know, Sundance, for example, has 335, which was more than I expected, but IFC, you know, who released Swallow, is only just at 200. Sony Classics only has 28,000, right? Like what can we be doing? What festivals and distributors, like, I don't know, like there's just no centralized way to push these films forward. Is that an idea that is worth exploring that we should be doing? Or is it really just we live in this capitalist world and everyone's out for themselves and the biggest fish wins? Like, that's what it feels like to me. And I've just, this whole pandemic, keep talking about like Netflix can't be the only place to make movies. You know, they announced also this week, Netflix is releasing one movie every week. It's more than that. They have 70 movies this week, right? And I also worry about, you know, if you look at that list, the commonality is that they are all A-list actors, stars, producer, writer, director. So then what happens to discovery in that way? What happens to inclusion? And so I'm just curious to hear from you guys, you know, especially having been so much in this space, is there a way in which we could be doing this better in terms of working together to get these movies in front of audiences? So it's just not the Sony Classics, 30,000 Instagram followers that, you know, what impact is that going to make?
But I just want to mention, by the way, it's very funny because we've been getting, you know, Molly and I are in the Academy and we've been getting physical screeners and stuff, but all the physical screeners have been from Netflix and Amazon. And
Totally.
like all the ads in Variety are Netflix and Amazon movies. Like nobody.
It's such a waste. Like, why are they mailing? And I mean, I guess maybe it's helping the post office.
It's about like, getting it in front of people. It's like there's no. They want to, you know,
that too.
They want you to watch the movie in any way possible. It's like they, you know.
Well, so, I opted I was going to opt out of the hard screeners, but I found that helpful last year just to see what, like I had stacks and like, yeah, it was quite clear that they was the only people spending that money. I agree it's also a waste of money, but it's definitely prominent.
I mean,
Yeah,
I guess
I'm a
they're
part.
also like,
yeah, sorry.
go ahead. Mine was just a side comment.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that there are a lot of older people in the academy that
Yes.
maybe don't have, would rather have a
Yeah.
hard disk that they can put into their.
That
DVD
was
player.
exactly what I was going to say, actually, is that there are a lot of old school folks that just cannot, they just don't know how to stream as well, you know? And I'm a part of the WGAs, so I get the screeners with, you know, the scripts, you know? So I think that one of the things that they were kind of, and it's all just Netflix and Amazon, and they figured, oh, we're going to be sending them the script anyway, we might as well throw in a DVD. And honestly, they have the money, and, and it's such a waste of money, but apparently
Old
they find
school
it
is a much nicer way than I put it. I didn't really mean
old
that.
school.
Old school.
Well, I mean, they are doing away with them next year, but you
Yeah.
know, to the question though, the point of Manette bringing that up is to say that they're the only ones spending the money. They have the most eyeballs. We just don't, like, we just can't compete. And so what do we as filmmakers do to compete in the space?
Well, you know, the Academy is actually, we've been discussing a lot of different ideas to democratize the process more, because I think the Academy does recognize this inequality really in marketing of films. And so they've been, you know, batting around a couple ideas, and oh God, there was something else. Oh, and also, oh, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out what I can't say.
That's okay. I was actually going to look up the number of Academy followers while.
Yes, here's what I was going to say. So the Academy
they have 3.6. So
the Academy streaming site. There's an Academy streaming site now that kind of, I think it launched 2 years ago, but like it's, you know, you pay one, you know, low-ish price. It's still a pretty high price, but it's a low-ish price, and you could put your movie there and put it in front of Academy members. So like that's cheaper than sending a bunch of screeners out, you know. So at least like if you're an Academy member, you log in, it's there. It's you know, it's a thumbnail next to all these other films. So I feel like, you know, if more organizations start doing that, like Film Independent maybe, or although, you know, that organization is trying to, I'm on the board of that.
I guess I'm talking about the general public too. Like, how do we, like,
Yeah,
we can promote with internally, but how do we get to audiences that are not industry?
I think that the distributors need to be more creative. I mean, they always have needed to be more creative in how they're reaching audiences and thinking outside the box, and not just using the box they've already created and putting movies in there, but that really like spending the time to think about unique ways to reach audiences. And unfortunately, like I feel like it will really depend on distributors being creative and having good marketing teams. You know, and maybe that doesn't have to be a lot of money if you're, you know, somebody I think on here said to hire social media influencers.
Yeah.
but yeah, like depending more on influencers and people to find just more creative ways to get. I don't know if I'm actually saying anything of substance here, but I think there just needs to be more creativity.
Well, is there a, and I guess what I'm getting at is there, would you agree that there could be an all tides, what is it, all tides lift all boats, whatever the phrase is? Like, let's say an idea is that there is one Instagram account for all the independent distributors, and they put all their movies into one account, so everybody is promoting to several million, and it's like you're building an audience as an independent community. Or is that just a bad idea because everyone is competing against everybody, and that's never going to happen? You know, I guess that's like where my head always sits, is why are we not doing this together?
You know, it's funny. I brought up a similar question with regard to like virtual cinema, and like finding a way to, because everybody was using like every festival and every distributor has been using their own technology platform. And I'm like, I'm really going to create a new account every time I want to go to another festival. Like, why can't this be a centralized system? And why can't we use that centralized system to like, you know, small distributors use that same system, and then like have one sort of portal for everyone to access art house films. And actually Manola Dargis asked the same question a few weeks ago.
That was bookshop.org, which they launched at the beginning of the pandemic.
Right.
They've got 900 independent bookstores, and it's one bookstore front. Like, that's, I've been mentioning that for months. It's like, but I guess the next question is why? Like, why was the book world able to take something on? What is the wall that we have here that is not moving us forward in that kind of similar way? Because I think everyone having virtual, I agree, like it's just, And in my world of the average moviegoer, they're just not going to do that. Like, we have to make it as easy as possible. That's why Netflix wins, right? Like, how do we make access to independent films as easy as possible for audiences?
That's a really big question.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rebecca, why don't you start this?
Can't do anymore.
Ira Deutschman wrote an article to sort of about virtual cinema, talking about the film version of Bookshop. But it's hard. I mean, there are special interests. Like, everybody has their own little fiefdom that they want to protect and they want to have control over, and it's like hard to
control. I think it's like with
Control.
festivals, they all wanted to make sure that their platform was the safest. It's kind of like the testing in this country, that we didn't use the tests that were working in other countries and had to go make our own and botch it up. But yeah, I think.
Well, oftentimes
go ahead.
Sorry. Oftentimes, I think that because there's no sense of collaboration, because I think that a lot of these companies compete with each other in a very vicious way, and especially for titles and stuff like that. And those things those are hard things to bury, to bury the hatchet. I also feel like, we were talking about distributors earlier and being creative. I think that a lot of the distributors nowadays, other than Amazon and Netflix, are kind of old school, and they're used to traditional ways of marketing films. And I think that, they're starting to change in how they approach marketing films, especially with younger people, because younger people are not being captured in some of these art house films because they don't know how. Hiring younger people to help launch campaigns, would be, and very much like, their social media and, electronic based, which is rather cheap compared to, doing things in print. But people are resistant of it, because they're so used to having a particular approach to launching films, especially in the award season,
Minette?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, yesterday we got a press break from our Swallow publicist, and I guess there's a very popular TikToker film critic guy who covered Swallow, and the video has 2.3 million views.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm
So the answer is hire the young people.
Hire the young people.
But I was looking at my notes, and I did write a note that just, for you guys in this conversation, despite all the ways in which you had to adapt, you did and still have very traditional releases, right? And so is it sustainable? I think that we were already, these questions I'm bringing up, we were already positioned before the pandemic, where it was extremely difficult for an independent film to break through, to make money, to have your investor recoupment. And so the reason why I bring up these big ideas that no one has answers to is because we were already going down this road. And I think the pandemic has only accelerated it. And, in this idea of the fiefdom, Molly, of each person just protecting their castle, I think we're going to lose a lot of them. So then what happens when we lose Bleecker Street, who has been dedicated to the theatrical experience? Sony Classics is dedicated to it. If they don't adapt, are they gone? And then we really don't have those distributors who are committed to the theatrical experience. So that's just kind of where my head goes.
So I see what you're saying. Yeah, is there any way that all of these companies can sort of them each other out a little bit?
Yeah, and I think the same as in the nonprofit, filmmaker lab space. I think we're going to see, unfortunately, them get smaller and maybe not survive, because they're all just. And again, it's not the ideal scenario, but also what's not ideal is that we come out the other end of this and there's just a very little space for independent film. And so that's, where my head spirals out to every day.
Yeah, there's been very little space for us for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it's always because there's fear there. And people not wanting to take risks. And now there's even more fear.
Yeah.
Well, and that,
how we've adapted a little is that we've also decided we're also doing television, and we have a project with Topic that we haven't announced yet, but we're also doing podcasts, so that's something that we have expanded too. It's not like we are giving up on independent feature films, not at all. That is where we come from, you know what I mean? But we also recognize that diversifying our slate is a good thing too,
And I guess, you know, that actually was a question I was going to ask you was how has the pandemic shaped, you know, your company? You know, I would also be curious as we're kind of wrapping up the hour. You know, you guys are all very accomplished filmmakers who have a footing in movies we've all made. You know, it's truly the hardest question on every webinar I've done, but what advice do you give to people who are early in their career, just starting? You know, I taught at AFI last year. It was extremely difficult to teach film students during a pandemic. And, you know, it was interesting. I interviewed for a teaching job for a fairly well-known university, and I didn't get the job. And I don't know why, but I think that I focused a lot in the interview about preparing students for what's to come and the future and the changes. And the woman just kept going back to like, well, but they're creating their short, so they should just be focused on their film. And I'm like, you can't. Like, I do believe we all have to be thinking ahead regardless of what stage we're in. And so for you guys, you know, if you're talking to a class of students right now, like what do you tell them about what's going on and how to start their career? Molly?
Yeah, I am teaching right now, and
but you do teach too.
yeah, and yeah, this was my first semester teaching at Rutgers, and it was actually a really wonderful experience. The online, I felt like we were really a more intimate kind of experience. And we just had a faculty meeting for our spring semester, and one of the teachers was saying that she found that the films that her students were making this past semester were actually much more bold and interesting than the films that people were making before the pandemic, because they were trying new things. And I think that the future of film really lies with the people who are starting their careers and the things that they're going to develop out of this situation. Again, it's the young people.
What do they do with their films when they're done?
Figure it out. They have to answer it.
I mean, it's interesting because young people nowadays, I mean, they believe in just getting it out there. You know, it's like transmission, immediate transmission. You know, and so I mean, what I say is, I think that authenticity is a very important thing, you know, in storytelling, and I think that is starting to really sink in to younger people now, and I think that they are much more unapologetic. They don't have to worry about like, oh, whether or not Middle America will appreciate my story, because back in when I was you know, creating films, you know, when I was young and being educated, that was something that was constantly I was constantly confronted with. You know, I was writing films about Asian Americans, you know, in the 90s, you know, and everybody basically said no. You know, nowadays kids don't give a shit. They're just like, this is my experience, this is what I'm going to do, you know. And I mean, that's a lot of the advice. It's going to be harder. It will be harder for filmmakers, but I think that there is more of a democratization of who gets to tell stories, and I think that is what is I'm optimistic about. I know that I've been saying optimistic a lot.
No, please. I need the optimism to counter my pessimism, so I don't mind it at all.
I think
Manette?
that monetization.
I'm
sorry.
a terrible teacher.
I don't think I'd want to take a class with both you and I think that we would
I'm also a pessimist like you.
get everyone to quit.
I would just advise not to get into film right now. Or ever.
Well, I mean, I actually think that
that's terrible.
Some young people that are going to personally monetize how they provide content. You know, I think that there's going to be ways in which they could create a fan base, or they create you know, communities in which their content could be, they're going to bypass, you know, distributors. You know, I think that that's kind of what is going to happen. I mean, this whole thing with, I know this is usually used for porn, but only fans, you know, and I think that filmmakers might look at that and kind of go, well, why can't I create my content, bypass everybody, and just go directly to my fans through the, you know, through how many Instagram followers I have and all of that type of stuff. I mean, that might happen.
Well, when I teach, I like lay out, you know, here's distribution 101, here's all the challenges, here's how Netflix is not making your movie like you think it is. And then sometimes when you end, it's like, that's like, but then what? And I'm like, go figure it out. Like, it truly is like, I'm in this generation that got stuck in this weird space where we need to shift it, but we're too far in it. that there's just like, we're struggling. I do feel like the new group of filmmakers and the way that they've stormed TikTok need to figure this out in a way that works for them. So yeah.
The thing is, it's interesting that you say that, because I think it's always been evolving. Like, that's the thing about indie film; it's always been evolving. And like, I remember this memory came up in my Facebook. Like, there was like this 10, 12 years ago at MoMA, we had this like indie film summit, and this was right around the time Day and Date theatrical TVOD had launched, and everybody was freaked out about that. People were freaked out about the VCR, when it came out. So like, people are always freaked out about something. There's always some new technology that is going to freak people out. Streaming is nothing more than TV plus VCR combined. So like, it's kind of it's kind of the same. It's a variation on
I think the money's different though. I think the money is different.
Yes, that's true. That's true for sure.
I worked in acquisitions in the early 2000s at Lionsgate, and there is no difference between a distribution deal in the early 2000s as there is now, except now the word streaming's in there too. But like, I feel the opposite. I feel like there's been very little evolution in terms of how they, there's still 20-year licenses, and like, it just is really, to me, still quite archaic. But there's like this particular space, and then there's this middle space, and then there's the up and comers that hopefully can kind of blow some of it out of the water.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that sort of points to my advice for newcomers, is that you have to stay on your feet, stay on your toes. Like, you have to constantly evolve, and it's like, it's a survival game. Like, especially with independent film, like, you always have to adapt, and my role model for that is Christine Vachon. I mean, she's like, she can adapt like every 6 months. She adapts, she's like, sees what the trends are and whatever, and she adapts, and she keeps making, wonderful, challenging, innovative content, and keeping her head above water, so I think you just have to be nimble if you want to stay in the
business. So I did my college internship with. I will.
Yeah, but I also think that the independent film industry has been nimble, and it has always historically been nimble, and that's why we're at our place today. I think we'll figure it out, and yeah, again, moving on.
Derek, I don't know you very well, but we're gonna start having more conversations, because I need your optimism.
That's how we keep them around.
I know, right? Great. I'm here in my dark hole by myself in Detroit every day. I have a new question I've been ending with, given how tumultuous this year already is. And so, I would love for you guys just to talk about what you do for self-care, and how do you stay positive? What are you doing in the day-to-day just to kind of, not drowned in these really rough days, not just, in the world and politics, in our personal lives, in our movies, like, it's just tough. And so, Molly, how are you managing these days?
Well, I remember you asking that question when we did the Hawaii Creative Lab together.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what do you do? What do you do to kind of keep yourself healthy? And I realized, like, oh my God, I don't do any of the things that I used to do. Like you said that you do photography, and I was like, God, maybe I should pull my piano out again and start singing. But so actually I have. But yeah, I mean, it's become all the more dire during this time, and the outdoors has really been kind of a way for me to get a little bit, not only out of my small New York City apartment, but also just to get away from things a little bit. And exercise has become like more important for that reason. And and talking with family too. I talked more than my family than I have in the past.
That's great. Manette?
This is going to sound so cliche, but I watch movies. I mean, as a producer, you're so busy making them, you don't get that much time to watch them. So like, whenever I get to, and I have a 4-year-old, sorry, he just turned 5, but he's in a remote pre-K. So I have to deal with that and work. And so, on days when I get very anxious and a glass of wine isn't going to do it, I'm like, I have to watch a movie tonight. I just have to, and so that just relaxes me.
Derek?
I cook a lot. And so it helps me, it takes a long time to make a film, and it takes years. And sometimes, like, when I cook, I'm like, I can be creative, I can create something, and it's consumed, and everything is done in a matter of 3
You can
hours.
finish it.
You can finish it, you know, and it feels like you feel like you've accomplished something. You get nourishment from it.
Yeah.
All of, you know, I also do yoga. I also do cardio, and I have to say that I started doing a Zoom. I call it the Film Nerds. It's a weekly meeting where we all watch a film, and it's usually a classic film or a you know, an indie film, or you know, a foreign film, a foreign language film, and we discuss it, and it makes me feel a lot less alone when you're in the
Are you
house.
texting through the whole movie, or do you talk about it afterwards?
We talk about it afterwards. We talk about it afterwards. I can't do the text during movie things. That really just, I can't pay attention.
No, we don't want you to. That was, yeah. No.
But that has also been, it's like watching movies. I just love it. I can watch a movie every day. You know, it's so, yeah.
I just want to, can I just show something?
Yeah, of course.
So that's I Carry You With Me. Please go seek it out. When,
It fits in a thumbnail.
I'm a producer. I have to sell. I'm always selling.
You always do. You're an amazing publicist, promoter for your films. And I will say, I've seen all of them. They are just fantastic. This group of these producers really make amazing movies. And so go see them. And thank you guys so much. This was really wonderful. Thank you for being open and
thank you for having us.
And I really enjoyed talking with you guys. So
I always love talking to you, Rebecca. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So everyone will be clapping if they could clap. So I'll clap for you.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming.